What we're really now seeing is that both of them, having posed as the victim for so long, are really the aggressors. And what I really thought at the end of it as well was this, which I think is a very, very pertinent point. When they came across for the Queen's funeral, and there was that amazing scene outside the castle of meeting the well-wishers in the walk, there was always talk of reconciliation. Mm-hmm. Charles and William and Kate go one side, Harry and Meghan the other side, smiling and all the rest of it. But at that time, William didn't know that Harry and Meghan had already recorded their poison for Netflix. It was already edited. All the stuff that we heard today about Charles lying, about William screaming and shouting, was in the can, was being edited. And they duplicitly did not reveal what they were going to do. Now, Harry's got form on that, because he did exactly the same at Prince Philip's funeral when he recorded that whole thing about how his father was responsible for his mental breakdown. And he stood in the St. George's Chapel, knowing that he'd done his family down in the Apple broadcast, the armchair broadcast, and didn't reveal it. So he's as duplicitous as Meghan, but it's worse, because she's an actress. She's got no stake in this country. But Harry, a former army officer, betraying the army, his country, his family, his father, dumping on the king, the future king too, and also on his grandmother, that is extraordinary. I mean, Diana would be shocked. The one thing Diana didn't do was be so duplicitous, so dishonest.
Well, no, and Diana made it clear, didn't she? Her criticism was always reserved for Charles.
Absolutely.
Not for the Queen, not for the institution of monarchy itself.
But Harry has actually gone out of his way to undermine everything that we stand for. He's gone out of his way to undermine the family, the institution, everything. And I think Diana, well, I know, we all know, Diana would be shocked that we're sitting here today discussing her son as an outright liar, as a man who conspired with Meghan in this 6 hours of perfidy. You know, for example, the whole description she does of the Portland hospital, the birth, that was completely fabricated. We all know the first interview was given to CBS. We all know that she never intended to go to the Portland hospital. She intended to have the baby at home. We know that they deceived the public about the birth data and time of the whole event. So, and also, you know, even it goes down to the lawyer saying that in that statement, when they have that long attack on the Mail, which is astonishing, that Meghan, we know she lied in her statement, that she says that she didn't cooperate with Omid Scobie, and she said that she didn't consult anyone when writing the letter to her father. That was in a sworn written statement. That was untrue. She then admits that it was untrue. But her lawyer says Meghan didn't lie. Well, extraordinary how the whole thing is unravelling.
And yet they don't produce any evidence.
None at all.
Of the claims that they have made against the royal family. For example, William being a bully. For example, this idea that the royal family was conspiring with the press to bring them down. Where is the evidence?
It's always they. They never name them, except they did name Jason Knauf, the man who in the end exposed Meghan's lies, and of course they're furious with him. So the whole series ends with that statement on the screen which says Knauf is the liar, not us. And that is the level they've sunk to. But I also think, you know, Netflix have a lot to answer for. If an established broadcaster in Britain or America produced that sort of succession, 6 hours of lies, they would be absolutely hounded out.
No balance.
Not in no balance, no truth, no criteria. I mean, what is the criteria? It is just propaganda. You know, Joseph Goebbels, Hitler's propagandist, would look with real awe at what the Sussexes and Netflix have achieved.
Because what they've done quite cleverly, right, especially for an international audience, because I know this is landing well, shockingly, outside of the UK. What they've done very cleverly is they use their friends, their lawyer, academics who have always backed their side of the argument to seem to give a balanced picture. It's as if you are watching a balanced documentary, but in fact, All of those people are stooges. They are plants for Harry and Meghan. I mean, this friend, Lucy...
Here, the makeup is never smeared. Everything is so rehearsed.
We found that clip of her, didn't she, saying that one of her great talents is that she can cry on cue out of her left eye.
And you know, the whole construction of her father, that man who in the end was abandoned by Meghan for months before the wedding, totally left to his own devices, isolated, really felt abandoned. That's why he sold the photographs, because he felt so besmirched. To actually say he was the reason why the whole thing exploded, why they had to leave in Britain. And then, of course, Harry saying, of course, Meghan's got no father. And now he doesn't have a father. They really are.
It's despicable. And I know you've obviously done this, as have I. You know, you go and you speak to the Markles, you get to understand them. But actually, you can look at Meghan's own public statements. I mean, she stood up at the United Nations. That was her most famous appearance before meeting Harry. And she praised Thomas Markle. She said he was a great father who instilled the values in her that allowed her to challenge that soap company, which she talks about all the time. She credited that to... Well, of course
Absolutely.
it was. But the point is, she credited her father. And now she's sort of trying to say, oh, yeah, he was a good dad, but I actually felt really lonely as a kid.
But I think what is also so terrible is that Harry never went to see the father.
Oh.
And why not? Because Meghan was ashamed of him. Because Meghan was already constructing a whole new narrative to exclude the father. And in that, the father, Thomas Markle, blames Doria. Yeah. And Doria plays a really sinister role in this whole story. Because remember, for 10 years in Meghan's life, from the age of 5 to 18, more than 10 years, she disappeared.
But we never hear about that.
We never hear. And she says at one stage, I went to every one of Meghan's plays at school. Of course she didn't. She was never there.
No, and also, Thomas Markle paid for the university fees.
And the school fees, and the car, and the home, and the blackout, he paid for everything, the petrol, everything.
So, Tom, look, can we look ahead? Because, of course, this isn't the end. You know, it's only a couple of weeks until we're likely to get the first leak of Spare, the Harry autobiography. Now, I hear lots of people, I disagree with them, but I hear lots of people saying, oh, what more damage can he do? But I think you think this book could be even worse.
Well, I think what they've had to do is they've had to stage and restrict what's in Netflix so they've got something new to sell the book, because there's £20 million at least. Well, I think there's definitely got to be something about Camilla. She's escaped so far. I think there's...
We know they don't like her.
We know we don't like her, and there's the whole race thing there. I think there's more about King Charles, the relationship with his father, the relationship between father and mother. I think there's a lot more about the whole institutions of British government. And I think something of the Queen as well. I mean, what he said about the Queen today was shocking, that she sat there at the Sandringham Summit not saying anything. But what was terrible, he said about the Queen, and he'd done about the Queen, is that he knew that he dumped on his grandmother when he was burying her in Windsor. And that is the level of their duplicity. That is unforgivable of Harry to have done that.
And when someone like Bauer says that, it's not just gossip or tabloid noise. He's arguing that the actual claims Harry and Meghan have made over the years, across interviews, documentaries, and Harry's memoir Spare, are no longer holding up under scrutiny. Now, you can agree with him or disagree with him, but his central claim here is very specific. He's saying that when you line up what Harry and Meghan have said at different points in time, the details don't always match, and that inconsistency is becoming harder to ignore. We're looking at the full body of their public narrative. The Oprah interview, the Netflix documentary, Harry's book Spare, various speeches and interviews over the last few years. Across all of these, Prince Harry and Meghan Markle presented a very clear story about their experience inside the royal family, why they left, and what they went through behind the scenes. And at first, that story landed with a lot of impact. The Oprah interview in particular set the tone. It was emotional, it was direct, and for many people it was convincing. But what Tom Bauer is arguing now is that when you compare that original interview to what came later, especially Harry's detailed accounts in Spare, you start to see differences that raise questions. And this is where things shift from opinion into something more concrete. Because disagreement is one thing. But inconsistency across your own statements is something else entirely. When a story is told once, people absorb it. When it's told multiple times, people start to compare it. And we're now at that stage. One of the biggest challenges in any long-running public narrative is timeline consistency. Events need to line up. Details need to stay stable. Because once those details start to shift, even slightly, people begin to notice. This is especially relevant when you look at how much material Harry and Meghan have put out. The Netflix documentary added more context, more footage, more explanations. But it also added more opportunities for comparison. And there's an irony here. The more you speak, the more you clarify, the more you explain, the harder it becomes to keep everything perfectly aligned over time. But what Bauer is pointing to is something beyond minor differences. He's suggesting that some of these changes affect the core understanding of what actually happened. And that's where credibility comes into play. Let's focus for a moment on Prince Harry's role in all of this, because his memoir Spare is a major piece of the puzzle. In that book, Harry provides very detailed accounts of his life, his relationships with Prince William and King Charles, and his experience within the royal family. It's personal, it's specific, and it's extensive. But that level of detail comes with a trade-off. The more specific you are, the easier it is for people to cross-reference, analyze, and question what you're saying. And that's exactly what's been happening. Then you have Meghan Markle's role, particularly in shaping the original narrative through the Oprah interview. Many of the most impactful claims came from her perspective, and those statements set the foundation for how the public understood their situation. What Bauer and others are now pointing out is that some of those claims have been clarified, adjusted, or appear differently when compared to later accounts. That doesn't automatically mean they're false. But it does mean people start asking more questions. At the same time, there's also something happening on the audience side: fatigue. When a story continues for years, especially one built around conflict, people start to engage differently. Some lose interest. Others become more skeptical. And some start digging deeper. For Harry and Meghan, that matters because their public role depends on people continuing to believe in and connect with their narrative. There's also the issue that keeps coming up again and again: the tension between privacy and publicity. Prince Harry and Meghan Markle have both spoken about wanting privacy and stepping away from the pressures of royal life. But at the same time, they've participated in major public projects: documentaries, interviews, books. And what critics like Tom Bauer are suggesting is that this creates a contradiction. Is this about stepping away from the spotlight, or is it about reshaping how that spotlight is used? That's not an easy question to answer, but it's one that keeps resurfacing. Then there's the dynamic with the royal family itself. Harry's accounts, especially in Spare, are detailed and direct. But the royal family's response has largely been silence. No point-by-point rebuttals, no detailed counter-narrative. And that creates an unusual situation where one side is very vocal, and the other says almost nothing. That silence, intentional or not, has an effect. Because when new inconsistencies or questions arise, there's no competing version being actively pushed. The original narrative either holds up under scrutiny, or it starts to weaken on its own. And in today's environment, scrutiny is constant. Now, it's also important to step back and recognize that Tom Bauer is not a neutral figure in this conversation. He has been critical of Meghan Markle in particular for years, and his perspective reflects that. It's possible that Harry and Meghan genuinely experienced challenges and felt mistreated. And it's also possible that some aspects of their public narrative have shifted or become inconsistent over time. So when we come back to Tom Bauer's main claim, that their story is unraveling, what does that actually mean? It doesn't mean everything suddenly collapses. It doesn't mean every claim is invalid. What it means is something slower and more gradual. Small inconsistencies start to appear. Questions begin to build. Public perception starts to shift. And over time, that can affect how the entire story is received. For Prince Harry and Meghan Markle, the long-term question is whether their narrative can continue to hold up under that level of scrutiny. Because their influence, their media presence, their public role, their credibility depends on it. So is Tom Bauer right? He's right about one thing. The story is being tested more now than ever before. Whether it's truly unraveling, that depends on how much weight you give to those inconsistencies. Because in today's world, telling your story isn't enough. You have to stand by it, again and again, under constant scrutiny.